Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Interact Studio on a rainy morning. Gosh, I'm just so glad to see such a wonderful, shining group of people. This is Interact's Thankful Morning, and we couldn't feel more thankful. It's an opportunity for us to just give a big hug to a special group of people because we've reinvented our morning speaker series a bit. We got away from it for a little while and decided to relaunch it with positivity and inspiration because we think there's a little room for that today, and we're happy to be the dispensers of that. We also have someone who is just magically perfect for this edition of our morning speaker series, and we'll get to that in just a moment, but she is magically perfect. Let me introduce you to the team. Julie Haldane in the back is one of our senior course leaders, and we always say one of the nicest people in America because that's not the world, if not the world. Yep, if not the world. So it is something that we heard somebody tell her a couple of years ago, and we've never let her forget it. We've just decided that's her mantle, but she is just one of the loveliest people and coaches you'll ever meet. Patrick Sheehan, behind the camera straight back, is my guy and my rock. He's been with me 10 years, and he is just a wonderful, not only videographer, but also a course leader, and he's been a game changer for Interact along the way. Susie Adams in the very back is Director of Media Training for us. She's also a crazy Clemson alum fan and dog mom to Murphy. And she dresses her. Well, listen, we better not go there. Because the whole team is kind of dog crazy, and we went to the gala on Saturday night, for Ties and Tails, which is just so much fun. And Michael Rogers is our Renaissance man. He is a musician at his church and loves playing music there. In fact, he even attracted Reverend Small, which is really fabulous we've apologized to Reverend Small up front, but we're glad that he's on the case with you. Right. Yeah, but Dad, incredible team member to us, golfer, Renaissance man, love him. Andy Ciordia in the corner is our wizard of IT and all things web, and is the kind of person that knows something about everything. It's really amazing. And Jess Barilla, who is Just Jess on WCCB, you might recognize her face. Jess is a guru about social media, but she's a producer and is someone who can do anything on her phone. She can produce a series on that phone right there, and it really just amazes me. Well, did I get everybody on team-wise? You know what is the craziest thing is that I get to work with some really special human beings who love what we do as much as I do, and I'm so thankful and grateful for them this morning. Now, what Interact does is help people show up as their best authentic selves, and of course, wouldn't it make sense that we would find our embrace into the community, the nonprofit folks who are doing the real work and holding up our community. And I want you to know that it's part of our, if not a big part of our success. We have always known since we were founded, this chokes me up a little bit, because since 2001, we have been inviting folks who are doing amazing work into these four walls to make us better. And it's a secret. People don't know that's the secret to success, but you've made us better. And we have learned so much from you, and through the years been just blessed with faces and talent. And you're about to meet someone who falls in that category. She's going to tell you her story, so I won't go there, but let me just tell you that this amazing and daring woman called me a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, She said, Lou, I have a story about following your inspiration, and I didn't plan on it, but people want me to speak about it. It's the darndest thing. She said, in fact, I've got a really big audience coming up, a pretty big darn deal coming up. I said, well, come on over, let's talk about it. Well, she has made us better, and her story is one that reminds us all just how powerful we are. We forget how powerful we are. So help me welcome Kathy Izard.
Thank you so much. Thanks so many for coming out on a rainy Tuesday. It is absolutely true that in 2014, I had agreed to speak for the Urban Ministry Center to 1,000 people, and I just wanted to throw up. I could not figure out why I'd said yes, and so I called Lou about 3 days before I was going to have to stand up and do this and said, please give me some courage and confidence to go into this, and then I've been speaking a lot since, but I absolutely thank Lou and Interact for helping me get up that first time, and I still sometimes want to throw up when I speak and I sweat, but anyway, I try and remember that I've done it before. And before I jump in, because sometimes I get going and I speak, I want to call out one person in the room, Joanne Markley, if you would raise your hand. Without Joanne, this story never would have happened. And I'll try and remember to pause in where Joanne comes into the story. But the reason we were able to do all we were able to do is because Joanne Markley does the work that she does and still continues to do it every day. I had a dream and a prayer, and she actually knew what she was doing. So together, we got somewhere. So my story starts probably back where maybe all of our story starts in how I was raised. And this is my dad with my sister on his shoulder. I was raised in El Paso, Texas. I was one of 3 daughters. And maybe at a time, you know, in the 1960s, 70s, when women were raised to have families and kids, and that's what was really important, those were never the conversations my dad wanted to have. He thought those were important. He was hoping that we would get married and have grandchildren. But my dad really taught us to dream big. And the conversations that he wanted to have were, what are you going to do in this world? How are you going to leave the world a better place? And he used to tell me, you can do anything, really, anything. And I know that my dad meant for that to be empowering, but I think at the same time it was somewhat paralyzing because I didn't know how to live up to that. I certainly didn't feel qualified to change the world, and I really wasn't even sure what that would mean. So I kind of went on with my life. I became a graphic designer. I graduated from college. But I wasn't feeling like that's what Dad meant when he said change the world, to do logos and brochures. And so by the time I was having my own family, I had 4 daughters. Those are my oldest 2, and then our third try for a boy was twin girls. So we definitely overachieved in the girl department. But I was trying to raise them in the same way, to dream big, and how are they going to leave the world a better place. And though in my professional life I was a graphic designer, I tried to tell them that, you know, let's do some service projects. And that's how we ended up down at the Urban Ministry Center. One Sunday a month we would go down there and serve, and it was our little way of doing good. And the first time we went down to the Urban Ministry Center, if you haven't been down there, I have some pictures of the Urban Ministry Center. I was a little shocked. You know, we drove our minivan into the parking lot, and there were several dozen people already there at 8:30 on a Sunday morning, and I was kind of surprised. And we went inside, and they said it was going to be a little bit like the children's story Stone Soup, that they weren't sure how many we were going to be serving or how much we needed to make, but just to open the refrigerators and make as much as you could. And certainly by 11:30, there was a much larger crowd. By 1 o'clock, we had served almost 600 people lunch that day. And that was my first foray into Charlotte's homelessness. I wasn't aware how big our problem was. And even that first time that we served, my kids loved it. You know, they loved being of service. They loved helping people. And so we started going back 1 Sunday a month for almost 10 years. I put this picture in the foreground to kind of tell you where I was in that 10 years. And I was very decidedly behind the counter. This is the serving line. Folks come and grab their trays and then come sit in the dining room. And while my kids would run around into the kitchen and hand extra cups of Kool-Aid or sandwiches or soup, I stayed in the kitchen because it felt very safe behind that counter. I think there's probably two reasons I stayed back there. I wasn't sure how someone became homeless, but I was imagining their stories were probably tragic and messy. I was a little fearful that someone might ask me for something and they might ask me to help, and I wasn't sure what I would do. I didn't feel qualified to really help. And I think the other reason I stayed behind the counter was I was pretty sure that some of the stories of people across the counter maybe mirrored my mother's own story. My parents were great, and as I said, I grew up with very encouraging parents and grandparents. My mother, however, suffered with an undiagnosed bipolar disorder. And for almost 16 years, it was the odyssey in our family of finding the right medicine and the right psychiatrist and the right combination that would eventually heal her. But from the time I was 6 till I was 22, she was in and out of psychiatric hospitals. And I'd never been able to help my mom. So I was pretty sure that whatever mental illnesses were going on with the people that we were serving, I wasn't going to be able to help them either. So I stayed pretty safely where I was behind the counter. That all changed in 2007 when I read a book called Same Kind of Different as Me. I don't know if some of you have read that, but it's the story of these two gentlemen right here, of Ron Hall and Denver Moore, who meet in a soup kitchen in Fort Worth, Texas. And I think Ron, he was an art dealer. This is Ron. I think Ron thought he was going to go to the soup kitchen and he was going to meet someone and he was going to reach down in the gutter and he was going to pull somebody up and he was going to save their life. And Denver ended up saving him right back. And that is what that book is about, is how we're all so much more alike than different. And Ron and his wife, Debbie, did something really remarkable. They didn't just befriend Denver. They moved him into their home. They ended one man's homelessness, and he became family to them. When I read this book, it haunted me. I could not stop thinking about it. And I got what I will call my first whisper. If you've read my book, The 100-Story Home, I talk a lot about whispers. And whispers are kind of that crazy little inconvenient voice that's telling you to do something that you don't want to listen to, but yet it won't go away. And I had a whisper about this book, and these guys, I had this crazy whisper that I should invite them to Charlotte. And again, I don't know why, but one day I looked up Ron Hall's email and I composed an email and I said, I don't know if you ever come to speak, but would you ever come to Charlotte? We'll raise money, for the homeless here. And I pressed send, and I sent it to him. Well, the only problem was I had no event. I had no authority to be sending that email. I had not told the Urban Ministry Center I sent that email. And 20 minutes later, Ron Hall answered me, and he said, sure, when's your event? So I don't know if any of you have been to True Blessings, which is that was the origin of the very first True Blessings in Charlotte. The first fundraiser for homeless was because I sent a crazy email, and Ron said yes. And we thought that first year look like a church supper for 200, and all of a sudden we had 1,000 people coming to hear Ron in Denver, and I couldn't figure out why I had listened to that crazy, crazy, crazy voice. And I will tell you the reason is for the 30 minutes I got to spend with Denver Moore the day before the event. I was taking him down to the Urban Ministry Center, and I was going to show him all we were doing, because it's a really remarkable place. It still is today. We don't just serve soup. We have mail, we have showers, we do laundry, we have an art program, we have a soccer program, we have a gardening program, and it's not to make happier homeless people, but to really engage people and earn their trust and try and get them what they need in their lives. And I thought I was going to take Denver down and he was going to see all this and he was going to say, good job, you mean first-rate homeless services, and give us a pat on the back. And the second thing that I thought he might do is say something really wildly inspirational. If you've read the book, he's very profound. He says some really interesting things, and this is from the book. The truth about it is, whether he's rich or poor or something in between, this earth ain't no final resting place. So in a way, we are all homeless, just working our way towards home. And I was sure that Denver was going to talk to one of our homeless neighbors and change their life, and I was going to get to witness that. And I was pretty excited about that. And you can probably know where I'm going. That's not what happened. I was taking Denver down and I was showing him all of these things, and the more I showed him, the quieter he got. He wasn't speaking at all. And he was looking a little bit like he was in that photograph, just kind of staring back at me and not saying much. And I showed him the soccer and the art and the gardening, and still he said nothing. And finally, at the end of this wildly uncomfortable 25-minute tour, we were standing in the base of the Urban Ministry Center with some stairs that go up to the right. And I thought the tour was over. I thought we were done, and I really misjudged this whole situation. And that's when Denver finally decided to speak. And he said, "Can we go upstairs now?" And he said, "Well, there's nothing up there. There's just offices." And he said, "Well, where are the beds?" And he said, "Oh no, you weren't listening on my tour. We're a soup kitchen. We're a day ministry. We're not a shelter." And he said, "You mean to tell me you do all this good in the day, and you lock them out to the bad at night?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Does that make any sense to you?" 10 years. 10 years I'd been down there. 10 years I'd been serving soup. 10 years I'd been helping. And it had never once occurred to me. I knew that we opened our gates at 8:30. I knew we closed them at 4:30. And I'd never once asked myself what happened afterwards. He said, "Does that make any sense to you?" I said, "No." He said, "Are you going to do something about it?" So that was my moment, right? There's a young woman in town, social justice activist, and she has this tattooed on her ankle. How will I live now that I have seen? I think maybe that's the question for all of us, right? That someday, that there's some moment, that there's some question, that there's a before and after, that you can never unsee what's been made known to you. You can't, once you see it, it's never invisible again. And that's how it was for me. And I tried to unsee it for 2 months. I tried to go back into my life in the same way, but I couldn't. So I ended up quitting my job and going to work for the Urban Ministry Center in January of 2008 to figure out how would we do this? If we were gonna do something better, what does that look like? What does that even mean? And we had one donor who was willing to help us and start a pilot program. And our idea was going to be homeless to homes, that we were going to move people directly from street to home. And we looked at places across the country and found out this is what they were doing. It was called Housing First. And while homeless service agencies at the time had been handling things, telling people, well, as soon as you get a job, as soon as you get clean and sober, as soon as you earn your way into housing, we will be able to find you a place to live. And Housing First says 100% the opposite. It says just by virtue of the fact that you are a human being, you deserve housing. Let's start there. Let's move you in directly from street to home and then ask you, what is it that you need in your life? And our first act was to hire a case manager, which is where Joanne comes in. She was the very first case manager for Homeless to Homes. And Joanne and I rode around Charlotte looking for apartments because we didn't have any apartments. We had some money. We weren't looking for free apartments. We were going to pay the rent for our folks. But as soon as we got to the part with landlords that says we're moving someone in who's currently homeless, game over, conversation over. But we finally found one landlord who was going to allow us to move in. So on May 17th, 2008, it was an amazing day in Charlotte. We finally ended 4 people's homelessness. This is one of the original people that we housed. His name's Eugene Coleman. And on the right is where he originally slept for almost 20 years in Charlotte. And this was on his very first day of housing. Joanne was there when we handed him the keys to his new life with his case manager. And he held up those keys and he said, "This is a Kodiak moment." And it was this amazing feel-good day. And on the first day that we moved folks in, we had volunteers and we had donated furniture. And it was this great, just feel-good day. And I went to bed that night exhausted and happy that after 6 months, we'd finally done something. We'd finally ended some people's homelessness. And I woke up about 2 in the morning, completely panicked, realizing, oh my gosh, I have 4 teenagers, and now there's these 4 other people, soon to be joined by 9 more, 13 people that we're in charge of their lives, we're in charge of what happens. What do we do now? And I worried all night that maybe there was a giant homeless party going on, and everyone was drinking and having a great time in these apartments that we didn't know, and what did it look like, and what if someone burned down the apartments? And I went into the urban ministry the next day, and this is Helen. If you've read my book, I call her Ruth in the book, but Helen was a teeny tiny woman and the very first chronically homeless woman housed in Charlotte. And Helen came running up and gave me a hug just like this, which was wildly unusual because Helen was not normally hugging me or anyone. And I said, "Helen, how was your first night?" And she said, "Great. Did you see how it rained last night?" I said, "Yeah." She says, "And I didn't get wet." I cannot tell you how freeing that was for me and maybe for all of us who are working on this, to thinking that we couldn't be enough, that we couldn't do enough, and wondering what this program would look like, and realizing that the bar for the people we were serving was to not get wet at night. And that summer didn't just transform people like Coleman and Helen, it transformed us and the way we were thinking about this. Because we were planning to do a pilot program for 2 years to see if it worked. And all of a sudden, we realized that with 30 days sleep, people that we thought were severely and persistently mentally ill, with some medication, with sleep, with case management, all of a sudden, we're doing exactly what was happening in other cities. They were asking for things in their own life. They were saying, I never got my GED. Do you think you could help me with that? Or, now that I don't have to sleep under a bridge, I don't have to drink so much. Do you think you could help me with a 28-day treatment program? Or even things as achingly simple as, if this is really going to be my own apartment, do you think I could plant some tomatoes? Because I used to love to garden with my grandmother. And we realized we could not just save this for 13 people. That was like finding a cure for cancer and only allowing 13 people to live. We were going to have to dream bigger. And so we started hearing another whisper that we were going to have our own building. We couldn't wait for landlords to catch up and decide that they wanted to work with us. And so we dreamed really big. We dreamed a building that would have 85 units of what's called permanent supportive housing for chronically homeless people, 366 square feet of apartment and own living space that had the case manager offices in the building. This had been happening in other parts of the country. We're going to bring this great idea here. And we were so excited about it that we talked one donor into giving us some money, and he gave us enough money for land, so we had land to put our building on. This is what we bought. I know it probably to you is not beautiful. To us, it was gorgeous because it was properly zoned and we could afford it. So we had land, we had architectural plans, we were ready to go, and our dream ran in to something that we didn't foresee. And that is, we had launched a $10 million capital campaign for our dream in October of 2008. So if those of you, especially in the financial world, will remember what was happening in October of 2008, the world ended in Charlotte. Those 2 banks that normally we would have gone to and said, hey, give us some money, dream this dream, everyone was reeling. And it really was just the darkest time. We thought we were just going to have to roll up our dreams and go home. And that's why I wrote the book, because all of the magical dominoes that were going to have to line up to make this happen, which seemed impossible, started lining up one after the other. And I tell a lot of stories in the book, but this one's my favorite. We'd been getting some press, some great press from the Charlotte Observer. They'd written some articles in the newspaper. And so people were hearing about it in kind of surprising ways. And one day when I was down at the Urban Ministry Center, I got an envelope in my office mail. It was a pink envelope, looked like a Hallmark card, and no return address. And I opened it up, and inside a couple of dollars fell out, and a note that said, "May God bless and multiply this small amount." And that was it. No idea who it came from, no idea why they sent it, or how they heard about us. But I couldn't believe it. It just made my day, thinking someone is sending us their last dollars to make this dream come true. 2 weeks later, I got another one. Envelope, different message, different amount, but same thing. May God bless and multiply this small amount. And they kept coming every 2-3 weeks. Someone just believing with us in this crazy dream. And it seemed like everyone was listening, because we had children who did a lemonade stand and sent us $105. We had 2 Davidson College kids who rode their bikes across the United States and sent us $6,000. We had $1 million gifts to anonymous $10,000 checks. And it worked. We did it. This is More Place. It opened on January 29th, 2012. I cannot even begin to express what it felt like to stand in that building that day and to know that the dreams and all the people who lined up to help us do that. And as amazing as that day was, the miracles were just beginning, because the people were starting to move in. This is one of the folks who moved in, the before and after. This is the power of housing, when you take people off the streets and give them dignity and give them a home. The gentleman that you met a few minutes ago, Eugene Coleman, this is the power of housing, Eugene Coleman. One of the best stories is housing this gentleman. We could not wait to house Dale Haley. We'd been serving him soup for almost 15 years down at the Urban Ministry Center, the nicest, gentlest, quiet cowboy you've ever seen in your life. And he had one of the most unusual stories in all of Charlotte around his homelessness. He had some mental health challenges, and he sleeping in the shelter with 300 other men was just not something Dale could do. So he solved his own problem by going out into the railroad tracks and finding a big cement block that was a platform on the ground. And Dale dug an 8-by-8-foot hole in the ground and lived in that 8-by-8-foot hole in the ground until the day he moved into More Place. And this is Dale, before and after, the power of housing. But the most remarkable thing about Dale Haley and housing Dale Haley is that he solved our mailbox angel story. Because what Dale didn't know, and what he couldn't tell us, is that Dale had a mom who loved him. And she read about More Place in the paper. And she didn't know if it would help her son. But she read about it and she thought, it may not help my son, but I could help somebody's son. And I can send my $5, and I can send my prayers, and I can hope that one day it might help my son. And it did. Because the woman who sent all those cards and letters all those years was Frances Haley. It was Dale's mom. I love telling that story because it's so unbelievable, right? So unbelievable. But it's also so what we all think. We think, my $5 won't matter. How could my $5 matter on a $10 million capital campaign? We think, my time won't matter. How could I, graphic designer, ever do anything to help homelessness? I wanted to read you a section from the end of my book, because this is the message I want to tell all of you. There was nothing special or chosen about me in 2007. It was only that I started listening to my life. And I think there is something that's calling each one of us, whether you think you're qualified or not. Each of us has a call, patiently waiting and whispering. You might have heard yours already. but are afraid to admit it. It could be as big as a building, as technical as creating pro formas for a nonprofit, or as simple and powerful as a ministry of sending cards. My message to you is this: trust the whisper, whatever it is. Whatever you feel is quietly, persistently, relentlessly calling to you, no matter how crazy or inconvenient it might be to listen. Once you hear it, that one true thing, it's impossible to turn away because it will keep whispering. And when it does, you must either spend the rest of your life answering it or pretending you never heard it. Be willing to listen. Be willing to let go. Be willing to take that leap of faith. When you do, the life you can't see is infinitely richer and more significant than the life you can see and thought you had planned. I hope you leave here today, if not with your own whisper, but at least willing to listen to yours. And I hope you don't wait until you're 100% qualified to listen to it. Because now more than ever, we need people willing to listen to our whispers. People who are willing to listen, willing to lead, willing to organize, willing to create. I hope you leave here today believing you can do anything. Really, anything. Thank you.
Is there someone who has a question for Kathy that's lingering on your mind that you'd like to toss out? Anyone that...
And we can talk about anything. We can talk about...
How can we help?
We can talk about raising 4 kids. We can talk about whatever you talk, writing a book. How can we help? Well, we are still doing this work every day. Joanne is in charge of Scattered Site. We not only have 120 people who are in Moore Place, because we expanded it in 2015 to 120. We have 260 in Scattered Site. I see Randall here with the men's shelter, we still have people who are in emergency shelter. The Urban Ministry Center is going to be launching another initiative, and so when we do, we're going to be building another Moore Place. So we definitely would love for you guys to help us with that. But in the meantime, it's the holiday season. I know the shelter is looking for ways to support their men. I know the Urban Ministry Center is looking for ways to support their folks. And even on the simplest, I would say some people, either if you have time to volunteer your time, if you can give. But Eugene Coleman would tell you what saved his life every day were people who were just willing to look him in the eye and acknowledge him as a human being. So I would think about that there is, homelessness is not an adjective that describes someone's character. It is a temporary circumstance that no one wants to find themselves in. So if you don't learn anything, or hopefully that's what changes for you today, is recognizing that those who are on our streets are human beings worthy of housing, and I hope that we don't stop until everyone is welcomed home.
So please stay, get another cup of coffee, say hello to Kathy, and again, thank you for being a part of Interact's Thankful Morning. Thank you.